I'm J.G. Michael, and this is Parallax Views. Hey there, Parallax Views listeners. On this edition of the program, we'll be hearing from returning guest and Marine James R. Webb. He's the son of Senator Jim Webb, also a contributor to Responsible Statecraft, occasional contributor, and served as a military legislative assistant to Senator Rand Paul. Jim and I are going to be talking on this edition of the program about the killing of Alex Pretti in Minneapolis and his concerns with regards to the second Trump presidency. I should let my listeners know that Jim is open about his politics. He comes from a sort of conservative, libertarian-ish perspective, and he voted for Trump twice. If that bothers you, I don't know what to tell you. Don't listen to the episode. I think this is a rather fascinating and informative conversation about where the country is at right now, and I think you'll be surprised by what Jim has to say. I always find him insightful, and I hope you will as well. Before we get to the conversation, I'd like to remind you that it is you, the listener, along with my one and only sponsor, Mike Swanson of Wall Street Window, that makes this show possible. So please consider supporting me on Patreon at patreon.com/parallaxviews. And if you've had any issues with being a $10 and above tier supporter who hasn't heard your name in the producer's credits, please contact me at parallaxviewspod@protonmail.com, and I will rectify that. I haven't been getting email updates about new subscribers for some reason. There's been some issues with that. So if you haven't heard your name and you're at the $10 tier or above, let me know at parallaxviewspod@protonmail.com. Also, check out my sponsor's website, Mike Swanson's wallstreetwindow.com, where you can get the best trading and financial news. I've had listeners make a return on investment from Mike's trading tips, so head on over to wallstreetwindow.com. And if you sign up to the newsletter, you can also, I believe, get a copy of Mike's ebook, The Twofold Formula, the single best trading pattern I have ever used. So once again, sign up for the newsletter at wallstreetwindow.com. And with that being said, let's get right to the conversation with James R. Webb. Welcome back to Parallax Views, a guest that I haven't had on in a while, but I enjoyed our last talk and I thought it was time to have him back on. I'm speaking with James R. Webb. He's a Marine, a consultant, a writer, and he has written for publications like Military Times and I believe Responsible Statecraft as well.
Correct.
So how are you doing, Jim?
JG, hey, thanks for having me on. I'm doing great. Hope you're staying warm in your neck of the woods. We've had 2 days of below freezing here in the Panhandle of Florida, and everybody's freaking out. So
I didn't realize you were in Florida. I'm near Tampa.
Yeah. No, I moved down here a couple years ago. Been here since December of 2023. Absolutely love it. I make it up to Tampa every now and then to come say hey.
So I wanted to have you back on just because I thought you could provide an interesting perspective, not just on what has been happening domestically the past few days, especially, but also just this first year of the Trump administration 2.0. And I value your opinions as a Marine, as someone who, I think has written some really great stuff for, like we said, Responsible Statecraft, Military Times. I think you provide a very unique perspective. And of course, you've worked with people like Rand Paul. You know the sort of inside world of DC in some ways. You've been around it. So what's your take on what has been going on the past year?
Oh man. So if I could boil it down to the bottom line up front here, what a year. Was that a year or a decade? It's just I really didn't think that we would really make it out of the first 4 or 5 months. It's been very intense. I think it's the top line on that is for people like myself, who voted for the guy, voted for Trump, voted twice for Trump. It's been a huge disappointment. And it's actually getting to the point where it's kind of scary, to be honest. And to give your listeners a little bit of context here. I was an early supporter of Donald Trump in 2016. When he came down the stairs, I thought that was interesting. But the real moment for me and a lot of people who work in the same field share, I would say, libertarianish views um, on government in general. Really hooked into the guy when he said "No more stupid wars" back in 2016. And it's I've worked for Rand Paul. I worked for RFK Jr. Worked for another senator from Missouri. Like you said, I know politics in DC. I grew up in it. My dad was a senator from Virginia, a Democrat, who also worked for Ronald Reagan back in the 80s. Um,
Also read a great book on the Scots Irish.
oh yeah, thank you. Yeah, it is a fantastic book. It's Board Fighting is I think one of the more underrated books that's out there. About American history in general. It's and I appreciate the compliment. But where I come from on this is, I think there's a split between the MAGA people proper. And if you look at the polling right now, Trump has a 37% approval, and that would be, if I was looking at that, putting my political consultant hat on, all he's doing is securing his base. Over 50% don't like him right now. Very strong disapprovals, and I think it's a mix of both betrayal on a lot of the issues that he ran on, and then at the same time taking a look at where this country is heading in terms of executive authority, and that's the real part that pops up my antenna, scares me. I hate to use the term scares, but everything he's done, whether intentional or not, has consolidated an incredible amount of power in the executive branch. And there's a lot of people screaming fascism right now, but I don't think we'll get all the way there under this administration. I don't think they're ideological. I don't think they're organized. But when you consolidate that much power in the executive branch through all these different actions we can talk about, it paves the way for some really bad things down the road. So that's kind of the top line summary there, Yogi.
So I have to get this out of the way because I know
Yeah.
at least one or two of my listeners, because I have listeners from across the political spectrum.
Mhm.
I have listeners that read AmCon religiously, American Conservative. I
Yeah.
have listeners that read anti-war, that are libertarians. I have listeners that are DSA members, and I have listeners that are like liberal centrists. And I feel like,
Mhm.
especially maybe the liberal centrists are going to be screeching when they hear, he voted for Trump twice. But so
Yeah.
I want you to get into it. Why did you vote for Trump? Maybe go into it a little bit more. I know you said the anti-war stuff, but let's delve
Right.
into that a little bit more. Like maybe so people can understand you better.
Mhm. Yeah, sure. Yeah. So at my core, right? And I'm not going to speak for everybody here. Everybody who's voted for Trump, but a lot of my fellow travelers, were politically moderate people. I myself am an originalist. If I could classify myself, I'm not a Republican. I'm not a Democrat. I voted for Obama. I voted for Trump. I voted for John Kerry instead of George Bush when I had the chance on Iraq. And I have a lot of friends who are card carrying socialists, and I come from a place where professionally and personally, I'll work with anybody. I did this in the Hill. Work with anybody who wants to reach the same common objectives. I don't judge people like their worth, their should we say their morality based upon their political beliefs. And I think this country has kind of lost that to a large degree, and I think a lot of that has to do with the current guy in office. He's really turned American politics into a team sport. Like you're either wearing his jersey or you are, in effect, I mean, I hate to say it this way, but the enemy. Um, and it's creating divides. When we're looking back at the rationale for voting for Trump, my most important issue has always been the warfare state. And you can say certain other issues domestically are probably more important for the American people in the immediate, whether it's the redirecting of funding from the military industrial complex into different programs, however you want to split that up.
So
But
it
my
wasn't
big
necessarily the sort of economic populism for you.
No, I mean it's part of it. But the fish rots from the head down, and the biggest issue our country has is the consolidation of executive authority, or the executive branch. And there is no place where the executive grabs more power than through warfare. And that goes back to how the Constitution is written and one of the key duties of Congress. And when you work your way around that, you constantly set legal precedent to just continue to open the aperture into all these different areas. And his promise of no more stupid wars, getting us out of the Middle East, realigning America, and then even some of the aspects of bringing manufacturing back. That had appealed to me in a big way. My grandfather on my mom's side was a steelworker in Pennsylvania and lost his job when the whole union kerfuffle occurred. So I've got deep roots over there, and I think that's pretty similar to um, I think a lot of people's views. I mean, if you go to any small town in eastern Kentucky, Virginia, Pennsylvania, I mean, the textile industry in the South, South Carolina, manufacturing jobs, particularly union jobs, and domestic manufacturing provided um, an incredible quality of life for people in this country for a very long time. And it was sold out in the name of, profits for the corporate board. Increasing shareholder value was kind of the mantra, and it left everybody behind. So people keyed into that. I keyed into it. Now, the reality of bringing those jobs back is quite different from the promises, right? But somebody willing to make that effort, coupled with curtailing our involvement overseas, and through that, whether he knew it or not at the time, and now I think he didn't know it, would require him to, in effect, give up power in the executive and hand it back to the legislative branch. It was fake. That was like Christmas morning for me in a candidate. Somebody from the outside who is going to effectively kick in the door and try and reset the way our system runs had great appeal. Now, the reality is quite different, right?
Well, what one thing? Okay, so for me, I was skeptical of Trump even before he got into office, but especially during the first term, particularly because he got us out of the JCPOA, which I thought was the best deal we were going to get with Iran, and I thought getting out of it would just cause more problems.
Mhm.
Um, do you share any? Did you have any criticisms of Trump in the first term, and what led you to vote for the second term?
Yes, plenty of criticism the first term.
Okay.
For a chunk for about half the first term, I was working on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee for Rand Paul. And in effect, my job was to ferret out legislation that would expand his powers or get us back into stupid wars and to fight that in committee. And
Is this during
we,
the whole? This is during the whole Yemen war stuff, right?
yeah, Yemen war powers, the assassination of Soleimani, um, and then the first attempt to overthrow the regime in Venezuela with Juan Guaido. All of those things popped up during my tenure there working for Rand as one of his close advisors. And it's all of those points were very sharp points of criticism from me personally, but also routed up through my boss. And I will say, in the first term, we started to see Trump kind of become absorbed by his, for lack of a better term, circle of sycophants that he was establishing, but not necessarily deliberately, but more through his managerial style, where talented people would not work for him. If you look at how he treats people in public when they no longer do exactly what he says, he'll throw somebody away like a candy wrapper, and that doesn't attract talent. So that's when I think the shift really started to begin with me. Now, coming on the second term, it's just I think it's just a testament to where our political system is at right now. Objectively, Kamala Harris was an absolutely horrific candidate, whose only promise was to continue the previous Biden administration, which really didn't do a whole lot right. But our only backstop to that was Donald Trump. So really, where do you go, right? It's really bad now. The Trump previously had moved some things in pretty good directions until COVID, which I think is very fair to pin mostly on him, to be honest. He was the grand jefe of Operation Warp Speed, and he approved Fauci keeping everybody in their homes and doing all these things. It's for some reason he gets a pass on it, but yeah, really, there just wasn't much of an option this last time around, and
I
I
think you had
thought.
I think if I remember correctly, you also had like sort of issues with Tim Walz.
Yeah, I mean Tim Walz was another horrible candidate. I mean, it's cynically, it's the DC political apparatus, trying to find an avatar of somebody who would make a good candidate, and this guy was the closest match, but they didn't really look at him in reality. He BS'd about his army service, um, among other things, and kind of an ineffectual governor, to be honest. Like it was not a good package.
I will say for my end, I can sympathize with you because there were things I did like about Biden. I particularly was a fan of Lena Khan being at FTC and Jonathan Cantor at DOJ because
Mhm.
I think monopoly is a problem. And I thought the
Fair.
CHIPS Act was a bit of a step in the right direction for US industry. At the same time, the stuff with Gaza was just unacceptable for me. So I
Oh,
think a lot
absolutely.
of people felt like they were in that position of like, it's that old South Park joke.
I tell my wife that all the time. We have to pick between douche and turd this time. So what do you want? What stench? Not to get too graphic on your show, but I will say, I was not completely enamored with a second Donald Trump presidency. Instead of working for his campaign, I went to go work for RFK as one of his senior advisors, and subsequently left that campaign over Gaza. And after talking to RFK about it and some of his public comments where he tied in the war in Iraq to the way Gaza was being executed and stated on the air that the troops there, myself, I was an infantryman in Iraq, engaged in state-sponsored collective punishment. And therefore, what the Israelis were doing was completely acceptable. And I could not stand for that. So I left the campaign and went and took care of my kids for a couple months before I got another job. Which then led me to vote for Trump. So,
So, with regards to Trump in this first year,
mhm.
what's your biggest concern right now? It sounds like you feel that. Well, let's start with this. What do you think of Marjorie Taylor Greene's latest comments?
I think they're great. I think she hit the nail on the head. I am, if I could be proud of a politician, I would be proud of her. I'm proud of Thomas Massey almost every day. But Marjorie Taylor Greene has really turned from a firebrand into somebody of substance. And what I most appreciate about her is essentially her Pyrrhic victory on this, right? Where she's become competent. She has become a voice for, I think, a very large segment of people who vote Republican. And as a result of that, she has paid a price politically. And quite frankly, there's a lot of ways to make a paycheck, and I can't blame her for wanting to leave Congress. But her comments, particularly, about the administration, about Minneapolis, I think are right on the money. And we need more people to stand up and start talking like that across the aisle because, you know, I found over the years, I lived in Baltimore for a long time when I was working on the Hill, and people thought I was this anomalous creature because I worked for a libertarian leaning senator and I lived in some place that was like so blue, it was like a deep navy blue. And I would talk with my neighbors and my friends, many of whom were card carrying socialists, and we had the same opinions about stuff, which was wild. The core issues, how you get there is something you can negotiate between two people, but we didn't like federal overreach. We didn't like, and still don't like wars overseas. Um, and the methodology for getting there is a little bit different. But there was a shock that someone who is branded like a conservative like myself, probably very very conservative, would agree with 90% of what somebody who belonged to SDS would spout. It's just one small mechanical thing, which is why our system was created to iron those differences out.
Yeah, and I was going to comment for people that don't know, with this, I'm just going to call it the killing of Alex
Hmm.
Pretti.
It's
Uh,
appropriate.
Marjorie Taylor Greene came out and said, she does open with, I believe in border security and I am for deporting criminal illegal aliens and she supports law enforcement. But then she adds something that I think was interesting, and I think that, I've even seen liberals and people on the left say, well, she's right about this. She says, however, I also unapologetically support the Second Amendment. Legally carrying a firearm is not the same as brandishing a firearm. And then she says, I support America's First and Fourth Amendment rights. There's nothing wrong with legally, peacefully protesting and videoing. And I've been critical of Marjorie Taylor Greene in the past. I've at times sort of seen her as being a bit kooky.
Mhm.
Um, but in recent months, I'm thinking to myself, I'm not saying that she's the greatest thing since sliced bread, but it seems like she's less divisive than a
Yeah.
lot of the MAGA figures we see now, ranging from Stephen Miller to Donald
Oh
Trump. I
man.
was wondering if you could comment on that, and also then we can get into Minneapolis.
Yeah, no, it's what's great about Marjorie Taylor Greene, with these specific comments you're talking about is that I don't it takes guts for her to do what she does, but the reality of it is she's not really pointing anything out other than what is like right in front of your face. And I just take a step back to think about that, like how in a way it's pretty terrifying that someone can just talk about the importance of America First issues. Like she's one of the original people on that. How to focus back on this country, get out of foreign involvement, curtail some foreign aid, focus on the people at home. And for her to speak about that publicly got her basically run out of Congress. Further, when it comes to specifically in Minneapolis, right? She said what I think the overwhelming majority of Americans probably think. I'm not going to speak for everybody once again, but we believe in borders. We believe in our rights. We believe that there is a solution to this. But what's going on is not it at all. And on a personal level, it's when you're taking a look at immigration, like I grew up in an area that was very heavily MS-13. My high school was like maybe a quarter Caucasian on a good day. Mostly people fresh from Central America, you know, and it's there were some problems, but with the gang members, but the average person is just trying to get by, man, and they're here and they're playing the game. And if ICE and CBP and all of the like the goon squad they have down there, who, in my opinion, and the opinion of many veterans, are people who, it's the guy who wanted to join the military, but didn't because I can't take a drill instructor yelling at me, man. I'd freak out. I'm too crazy. It's these second and third tier guys who get very short training, all kinds of kit. They look sweet. They look like operators out there on the street. But what are they doing? They're grabbing Juan off the corner after asking to see his papers, violating his Fourth Amendment. I don't know why he's on his way to work. There'd be a lot more respect in this country for that and a lot more approval of what they're doing if this element was, say, kicking in doors on the Serranos or MS-13 or any of the organized crime elements which are bringing human and drug traffic into this country. It's just not being addressed. And quite frankly, some of the videos I've seen prior to uh, this most recent shooting just were abhorrent, where you have ICE agents popping out of vehicles, walking up to one in particular, walking up to a gentleman at a gas station and being like, "Show me you're a citizen." And him and his buddies are armed to the teeth. My base reaction would be tell that guy to go pound sand in a much more specific way, because it's a violation of the Constitution. It's also an improper application of the assets they have, and it's not helping anybody, at all.
Yeah, I actually wanted to mention what do you make of Christy Nome saying, be prepared to prove your U.S. citizenship? Because I thought that was a very telling moment that we have to prove it at
Mhm.
any time.
Right. That's you start talking about executive authority domestically, that is a major, major red flag. She should have been impeached on the spot for not for basically not knowing the basic left and right lateral limit of her job. It's just my opinion here. But when you start disenfranchising people because they are not a card carrying citizen, you're completely looking past the Constitution. Everybody who comes into this country has the same rights. Um, they are blanketly applied. You are here. You are afforded our Bill of Rights because you are here legally or illegally. It doesn't matter. And there's been a kind of an attack on this on the right, and I mean kind of like really big attack on this, and it's actually being practically applied in places like Minneapolis where they are carding people left and right. And it sets an incredibly dangerous precedent, right? Where you can violate somebody's Fourth Amendment rights, go into their home, check their papers, do all these different things under the assumption that they are not a citizen and they don't get it right. But the precedent you set is that, anytime I want to go, you know, raid a house, arrest somebody, do these different things, which typically require you to get a warrant from a judge to go do. You have to show probable cause, go through the whole process here. Um, Once you set the legal precedent that, like, hey, if someone's not a citizen or we believe they're not a citizen and we can go do this, we can curtail their rights, you open this up to anybody in this country. And that is the slope that terrifies me the most. To be honest, you effectively have it's not a secret police. It's a constitutionally immune armed gendarme who can go execute the will of the executive branch whenever they feel necessary. And that needs to be stopped immediately. And when she said those comments, that should have been a hard tell for all of Congress, and they should have gotten rid of her. And it should have been a front page issue until the legislative branch of government got their way.
To get more into this, the Alex Pretti
Mhm.
killing, what can you talk about your initial reaction to it, especially as someone who's a veteran?
Yeah, straight murder. That's the first thing I saw was a guy beaten and shot in the street like he was a dog. And to it was that's my first reaction, JJ. Sorry if it's hot coming out of the gate. But it's I couple that or add context to it with my time on the ground in Iraq, particularly in 2006 and 2007. I was in the Battle of Ramadi. We lost 16 guys in my unit, KIA, number of attachments, cleared a large section of the city. And one of the things we did was we took a lot of people. We called them pucks, or you can call them POWs, but since it wasn't officially states like an official declared war, you can't say a prisoner of war, person under control. But you go into a house and you'd find bomb making equipment, weapons, somebody on the street who like whatever it is, and the rule was that the UCMJ law, sorry, is that once you have positive control of that individual, you can't hurt them, and the way they handled this guy was both over aggressive and completely unprofessional. Um, Following just the video on that, it's you have a guy run up to a woman and throw her into the sidewalk. Try being a local cop and surviving with your job if that's on video. Straight up, won't happen. Um, I lived in Baltimore for more than a decade. I got friends who were feds, they're DA agents, ATF guys, and they were constantly filmed no matter what they did. And they just learned to ignore it like professionals, right? This other side, the other side with these ICE guys is it's nuts. And it shows a culture and a leadership culture which has told them to act the way they do. To follow that thread a little bit more with the gentleman who threw the woman, he then turns around and engages Pretti, and him and five, six of his compadres there uh, were so scared of a guy on the ground that they had to shoot him once they found a weapon on him. He wasn't brandishing. And initially I saw that video of of them pulling the weapon off him, and I was like, "Holy cow, this is worse than I thought." I hope this isn't an AI, bot generated video spreading hate and discontent. But turned out to be true. They did disarm him, and then they shot him, and it is absolutely uncalled for. If you had an incident like that, or even near that, at my time in the Marine Corps, somebody would go to jail, and every leader in that chain of command, starting with the team leader who was on the ground, squad leader, probably the platoon commander and company commander, would all be fired, because you don't have control of your guys and you're breaking the law.
Yeah, and I believe it was. I mean, I need to watch the video again, but it was like they riddled him with like I don't know how many bullets. I think it was like there were
Mhm.
10. Like I've heard 10 shots.
Yeah, I mean that's I mean once you get to that point, I've taught um these scenarios, and it becomes a reaction drill, and it never should have happened. But once somebody yells gun, the next step is for everybody to reach for their holster and take a step back, and then there's a pop, and it becomes a reflex action. um I don't I don't really know what to make of the end of it. It was disgusting. It's what led up to it, right? And quite frankly, the only part of that they executed with any kind of professionalism was how they spread out as they were firing at the guy, which probably shows you where their training's at, to be honest. They weren't attempting to control him, and they were pistol whipping him in the face. I don't know, I'm still so hot about this, because it's somebody who's, you know, legally carrying, deciding to protest, and goes out there. The whole 3 minute interaction, he's just filming. Granted, he's part of a group of agitators, but whatever. Like, I doubt you can go to a protest these days without hooking into some organized group. It doesn't make them paid agitators or on anybody's dole. It's just that people like to be organized. And hats off to him, but he did not deserve to die. And the whole interaction leading up to it did not show any threat coming from this guy whatsoever. His only quote unquote mistake was stepping in and saying, "Don't throw a woman on the pavement." I mean, and I hope that every man I know would do the exact same thing, like, because it's a violation of like a cultural norm, if nothing else.
As someone who's a Marine, I mean,
Mhm.
how take us through how could this scenario have played out differently? What do you think could have been done? I mean, I feel silly
Mhm.
asking the question, but I almost feel like it's worth asking, like, could this have played out differently?
Oh, absolutely. It was completely instigated by ICE, by the feds on the ground. Now, and if you go back to the I
It
think it's
was
like the
real quick, it was CBP in this
CBP.
case, not ICE. Yeah, yeah.
I love them together, but my apologies
Right.
to
No, I
ICE.
get you. I do the same
That
thing.
no, but there's any number of ways this could have been avoided, de-escalated. All it took was somebody with one of the agents being calm. You're not under threat. None of the like, nothing bad is happening to you. You don't like being filmed? Walk over and say, "Stop filming me." Ask. They don't have to. Or say, "Hey, talk. Go over there. Move away. We're trying to move a vehicle." Instead, this guy bolts across the street, grabs a woman, and chucks her. And that is going to inflame anybody, within visual distance of what is going on. Secondly, when Pretty, I guess, said, "Don't do that," your first reaction should not be grab this guy by the throat and smash him into the pavement and then get five of your friends to jump on top of him. Like, you can let him say what he wants. He's holding a camera. You can let him go. You don't have to do anything. He wasn't presenting a weapon. He wasn't acting in a threatening manner that I can determine. I mean, maybe he told the agent, I have a gun on my hip and I'm gonna shoot you." But that seems very unlikely because they were all stunned when they found that weapon. But basically, at a baseline, just treating people as if they're people, being calm, asking for what you want instead of trying to physically force people to do things that you think are important.
Yeah, it's I mean, it's all just very upsetting.
Mhm.
And what's even worse is I think the White House, I know Daniel McAdams posted about this from, I believe, the Ron Paul Institute. The White House is now saying it's not going to release body cam footage
Right.
of ICE or CBP shooting of Alex Pretti. So what do you make of that? I mean, this just feels like an attempted cover up.
It is. It straight up is. We have no names. We have no disciplinary action on any agents. They're not going to release the footage. And quite frankly, like, I don't think we need the footage because there's so much of it around. It'd be interesting to see the up close, interaction as it occurred, possibly hear the agent's voice, see what he was saying, what he was encountering. From the sense that, I'd be personally curious to see how much he inflamed the situation rhetorically, through threats. I'm not talking about Pretti, I'm talking about the agent. And they don't want to release that. I'm sure it's really bad, but there is not one angle of that which looks good either. And we've got our answer. And what needs to happen is there needs to be accountability for this. It needs to be shut down. These agents need to be taken off the street, retrained, and the executive branch, Trump, I think would really benefit from a pause and getting out there and explaining what the heck it is they're doing that requires this. Just so the American people can hear it and choose to reject it if they want to. And but at the same time, the course they're charting with this is incredibly counterproductive politically for him, and at the same time is flat out wrong. You can't have police shoot citizens and not have any kind of investigation or accountability to it. And what they're doing, like you're saying, covering up to prevent one is abhorrent. But there is an ability to correct that, and that lies in the legislature, or through lawsuits.
I wanted to ask too, because I know it's going to come up and people are going to want me to ask about it, and I don't know your opinion on it, so
Mhm.
I'm going in blind. What do you think about the past? Because this is not the first ICE shooting we've seen.
Right.
I know we had Renee Good a few weeks ago. Do you view this as different than that? Because I know I've seen differing opinions on that one.
Oh, so like I'll go with the general and get to the specific. The Renee Good shooting was bad. Very bad. The Pretty shooting, horrific. I'll classify the Good shooting as one of these things where it shouldn't have been done, but at a baseline, the guy did it because he could. He understood his own rules of engagement, was not under a dire threat. I don't believe that she was trying to run anybody over, but she did make an aggressive move with a vehicle, which in a lot of circumstances, particularly this guy's ex-military, way we operate overseas, if somebody drove a vehicle at you, they get shot. Um, but that was at checkpoints, totally different. Um, but he did not need to fire 3 rounds into her face. You watch the tape, the car's pulling away, he's firing from like a 90-degree offset at her. He's no longer, you know, he's no longer being threatened if he ever was in the first place. Looking at that tape, I don't think she saw the guy who shot her. I really don't. He came up from the backside of the vehicle. She was distracted by another officer inside of her window. She's trying to leave for whatever reason, and then turns the vehicle, touches the gas a little bit. There's a guy bearing down on her with a weapon and puts 3 rounds in her. And that's bad training. And the fact that that guy is not being prosecuted, or the fact that there is no serious investigation that I can tell by this point, is an absolute travesty of justice. And once again, it consolidates power in the executive branch because you have foot soldiers for the executive operating domestically outside of the boundaries of the Constitution without any kind of legal accountability for their actions, period. And you can't have that.
I want to get into this more deeply because you've alluded to it, but what is the cause, or what's the sickness we're dealing with here where agents are acting this way? Is this like, is this just like not well trained? Is there sort of a Keystone Cops element? And what role does leadership play in all of this?
Leadership plays the most pivotal role in this. I think it's all the things you described, where you have bad training, you have people who are flocking to the job because of money, in large part, but at the same time, these folks are they're they're empowered to do what they do with a mandate that puts quotas and numbers, like basically bulk arrests over quality arrests. And I don't know if any of your listeners are fans of The Wire like I am. Absolutely love that series. I've seen it
Yeah,
20
great show.
times. Oh, great show. But it's a common theme in there too, where they go to stat-based policing. And it happens in America too, where you want numbers And in the show, they call it rip and runs. Instead of building good cases and taking high level, impactful criminals off the street, they're looking to take whomever off. And if you apply that methodology to war, where all you're focused on is killing foot soldiers, or taking foot soldiers off the battlefield, and not leadership or command elements, the aspects of an organization that provide structure and guidance and all these different things, then you just do it forever. It's the formula for forever war, quite frankly. And to tie it back to something we talked about, or I hit on a little bit earlier, is that the proper application would, I believe, and I think a lot of Americans expected this to happen, was to use these guys, this force, to go after your hardened criminals who are running guns, who are running drugs, who are trafficking people, and they're hard targets, right? It's a bunch of hardened criminals, probably killers tucked in there who are armed to the teeth in these houses, and that's that's a tough thing to do. When you know where they are and say, "Hey, we're going to kick in this door. We're going to go get these guys." Your people have to expect some casualties, but at the same time, like, what's the greater good for America? If we're taking a bunch of people off the street who are mowing lawns, who are doing low wage work, or supporting a family, does that improve my quality of life? No. But if you expend resources and have people sign up for these large paychecks, which they're getting, and say, hey, but there's a high risk to this. We're going to send you to go take out MS-13 cells, you know, in this geographical area. You're getting paid a lot because you might get shot. How does that sound? That'd be totally different. There'd be a high level of respect. It would be, in effect, like a military operation, domestically, outside of Posse Comitatus, because it's a federal agency. But the result for my kids and my quality of life would probably be higher. You might curtail some of the fentanyl traffic into the country, and curb human trafficking as well.
I know we've talked about Pretti and Good. Do you think, and I think you were alluding to this, violent criminals are one thing, but I mean, listen, I live in Florida. There's
Mhm.
people I suspect I know that are probably undocumented, but I don't really care because they don't pose a threat to me. I'm more worried about, methane old tweakers that
Yeah.
run around here, occasionally. Do you think there is a way that law enforcement needs to deal with undocumented migrants? Because I feel like there's a sort of theatricalness to this that is completely unnecessary and often very violent. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm saying it's not just about U.S. citizens, but I even
Mhm.
think you have to treat these migrants with like basic dignity if they're, I
Oh
mean,
yeah.
especially if they're not violent.
Oh, 100%. A 1 million percentage. It's they're people, right? They're people who, for whatever reason, were drawn to this country to make their life better. Um, and that's their baseline. Now, I can't bring myself to think negatively about any of that. Um, what you need to do is to fix the systemic issues that make it A, easy for them to come into the country, and B, attract them. And you can talk extensively about the welfare state if you want, but I like to look at corporate America. Um, we talk about drug running, we talk about illegal immigration. Um, what's never a focus of the federal government? It's the companies that enable this. You can do a quick Google search for any, like, a HSBC is a good one. Their involvement in narco trafficking. They paid a very small fine for several billion dollars that was laundered. They got caught, by the way, several billion dollars that was recognized, not all of it, that was going through their banks. Um, and the penalty, in my opinion, after reading that federal case, not high enough to dissuade them from doing that in the future. So if we're going to passively allow drug organizations to use our banking system, how serious are we about drugs? You talk about illegal immigration, undocumented folks coming into the country. It's kind of it's the same deal. Like, what companies are leveraging this it's effectively slave labor on some level. You offer them a
Real
few
quick
dollars
in
an hour.
regards to
Go
that,
ahead.
my
Yeah,
ex said that to me recently in an
really.
earlier well, she said, it's funny. A lot of people will say we should go after the undocumented migrant, but they
Hmm.
never want to go after the businesses that hire them. And
Exactly. And exactly. She's so on the money. And it's so true. Meatpacking plants, corporate farms. It's not Joe Bob who has 110 acres in southeastern Missouri who's hiring a bunch of undocumenteds. It's the Purdue operation that owns 15,000 acres, and rolls these folks in, pays them off the books, a wage which looks super attractive to them because they're sending a lot of this money back, but in reality provides them almost no quality of life in this country, and then undercuts locals who might want to do the work. That's where you need to focus. They're coming here because they get health care, they have schools for their kids, they have a job. And if you're sitting in, a third world country living in abject poverty, why would you not do that? Like I would do it. I'd move my family in a heartbeat. Saying, hey, you just gotta walk. And then I can get my kids paid and they're taken care of and they have a chance at a much brighter future. I'll do it twice. I do it 20 times for my kids. But yeah, that's the crux of it. It's everything's getting pinned on, people who are undocumented, housekeepers, lawn service guys. I mean, you name it. They're not a threat, And I'll go back to my high school where we had a 7-Eleven down the street, and in between baseball practices, an upperclassman when I was younger would throw me in his beat up F-150, and we'd roll to this local 7-Eleven to get Gatorade and snacks for baseball practice, the second one of the day. Any number of times come out of the 7-Eleven, dudes were just lined up in the back of the truck, just standing there. They thought we were, looking for a crew. We'd be like, no trabajo party, and like, oh, okay, they get out. No big deal. No one's threatened. They just wait for the next vehicle to come by to pick them up so they can make a wage and provide for their family. And the demonization of that is very problematic, in my opinion.
I was curious, have you read anything about the screening process for these ICE agents?
A little.
There was an article in Slate that was really interesting by Laura Jadid, and she
Mhm,
actually applied for an ICE job, and she thought they would. I mean, I guess she was. I believe she was a veteran. Yeah, she was
mhm,
deployed to Afghanistan twice, straight out of the army,
mhm.
and 82nd Airborne Division.
Yeah,
Now, what's interesting is she thought, okay, they'll like that, but they're going to figure out who I am by Googling me. And
right.
she thought they would look into her and find out she really does not like ice. And what's weird is they just like passed her on through.
Yeah.
Like they didn't even do a check on her. I mean, literally, this very anti-ice journalist basically almost became an ice agent. And I'm like, well, if
Mhm.
that's going on, what else is going on?
Oh yeah, yeah. And I mean, I'll break that down a little bit. I think you answered your own question. To be honest, I mean, that's the threshold right there. Oh, she was in the army. Oh, okay. Oh, okay. Yeah, here you go. Like, welcome. And it's I look at these guys out in the street in any number of places, and you can see that recruitment mentality. They do not have adequate training to do what they're at, what to do what they're doing, to do basically raids, and crowd control. And I think it probably goes beyond that. Like if they just saw that she was in the army, it's not like she was a Green Beret or anything like that. Not eminently qualified to do raids. Plus the fact that she is a fairly well-known journalist is comical. And you're seeing the problems on the ground. It's not good.
Why do you think this is happening organizationally? I mean, I know I keep coming back to the leadership thing, but it's like it almost boggles my mind how these things can happen. It's like does DHS know what they're doing? What I don't it's very bizarre to me. It's almost like everything feels disorganized.
Yeah, I think it is. I think you're totally correct, man. So you got to zoom out and take a look at who is in this administration at different levels. So you have Pete Hegseth over at now the Department of War. It'll be back to defense before we know it. But he is eminently unqualified for that job. And but what does that going for him? He's a sycophant, basically.
What was he
So
before? Wasn't he a Fox News guy before this?
correct. Yeah, he was a commentator on Fox News. Had a little managerial experience throughout his career, but I mean, running the Pentagon and all of the DoD that is a that is a bear of a job, and that requires somebody who's managed very large organizations previously. Like you're talking about, one of the largest, if you want to compare it, one of, if not the largest corporation in America, is the Department of Defense. Like size wise, complexity wise, more complex when you talk about how to sustain operations globally and all the different things that they do. So what you need is somebody who's got experience at a minimum of running that kind of enterprise, and that he's not it. Christy Nome, what does she know about DHS? Like Kash Patel, was he ever an FBI agent? Like did he do a ride along with a local cop before he was made the FBI director? I don't know. I don't think so. But this is the problem: is you have any number of people in key positions who aren't qualified to do it. The one thing that underpins them is loyalty to the president on a personal level. They will execute whatever he asks. They will not criticize. They do not push back. Now, the question I have is this by design, or is this a bug or a feature, really? I would say both, because you have not attracted the same kind of talent that administrations normally do. I'll throw Tom Homan out there, right? So he's a career guy who worked in the Biden administration, or worked in the Obama administration, pardon me, and then was a holdover who came into the Trump administration for 6 or 7 months, where he was director of ICE, and his profile is a guy. I guess so. You could almost say at this point is from like the American political old school, where he was appointed by a Dem because he's good at his job, and not every position is filled with a political ally, or not supposed to be. Held over to the next administration, and then left his post and has kind of hung around, and I guess he's the border czar. But he has some continuity through these different administrations because he was competent and people wanted him in that place. You don't have that across the administration now. And if you don't have people who understand the basic nature of the work of the people that are underneath them in the organization, they can't do their job. Further, if you have somebody who's just going to check the box for the president at any of these places, then it's not going to be effective. There's no friction. You don't make diamonds without friction.
I don't know if you can necessarily talk about this, but so you've had experience with Rand Paul, and
Mhm.
whether my listeners agree with Rand's politics or not, I mean, Rand Paul, I do think he tries to be responsible as a statesman. I mean, he will work across the aisle. Not that
Mhm.
I'm like Mr. Oh, we all need to be bipartisan, but like he did work with Bernie Sanders on the Yemen war powers
Oh yeah,
stuff.
yeah.
How do you think his approach differs from like a Trump? Like, can you compare and contrast what you've seen in DC to what Trump is doing? Like,
Mhm.
what's the line between responsible statecraft and what we're seeing now?
Oh wow.
I hope that's
I'll
not
take
too loaded.
that's oh man. So let me start with my personal experience with Rand trying to work with Trump. Where if you look at Twitter now or whatever the heck Trump uses through social for comments about Rand Paul, they're all hyper negative. He's the worst senator ever, blah, 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 blah. If you go back to 2016, 2017, 2018, 2019, um, he and Trump had a great relationship. And the only way though, even within that, the only way that we could convince Trump to support something was to, in effect, like you have to kiss his ass. That's it. He doesn't want to hear the truth. He wants to hear how something is going to make him awesome or why he's so great. And straight up from the inside. And we became less and less effective at that over time with the introduction of people like John Bolton, which led rise to someone like Lindsey Graham, who Trump historically has just made fun of all the time, but now is like kind of his ride or die. It's odd, but you can't do your job on the Hill effectively as a legislator if you're always agreeing with the president. I don't care if he's in the same party or differently. You have to have pushback. You have to have, somebody say, hey, like, it doesn't make you a terrible human being to not want to bomb Iran. Like, here's why. Here's why it's a bad idea for everybody. If you even take that approach with this guy right now, you'll end up like Thomas Massey or Rand Paul. And the line between responsible statecraft and what we see now, oh, so this is, unfortunately, um, I think that we have crossed the Rubicon on empire openly. Um, I'm not ready to accept that as our definite future, but the
What
legislative
do you mean
branch.
by cross the Rubicon on empire?
Oh, our actions in bombing Fordo, snatching Maduro, and what we have going on in the Middle East right now, where all of our assets are stacking up to take another run at Iran. Um, None of them have congressional authorization. We in effect have a single leader who is deciding that we should conduct military action, conduct acts of war. Let's be blunt about this. You go in, you kill a couple hundred people, and you snatch the leader of a foreign country. That is an act of war. You are just short of a state-sanctioned assassination at that point, which we're not supposed to do. You bomb somebody's nuclear facilities in Fordo. That's an act of war. Like straight up, drop bombs on the country. I don't care how people spend it. But Article 1, Section 8 vests the power for that within the legislative branch. And violations for that, particularly that serious of an action, which wrecks our relations across the board with any number of countries when we do these things. And you're talking like, when I say wreck, you're talking decades to repair relations after you with not just the countries we're going at, not just with Venezuela or not just Iran, but all the regional players, our partners take a look at this, and that will take decades to repair. Um, and the appropriate mitigation for this is impeachment, because he's violated the law domestically, but at the same time, as a mechanical feature, the only way that the legislative branch can get the power back is to do something, right? To do something like that. To say, hey, no, you can't do our job for us. That's outside of the boundaries of our principles and the law of this country. Therefore, here is the repercussion. The next guy who tries it, same thing will happen. Um, I don't see that happening. So what has in effect been allowed to occur is that the power to make war is purely in the executive branch. We don't even need an authorization for the use of force anymore, and therefore he can roll around like a king or an emperor, bombing or invading whatever country he wants. And we're not hearing a peep from Congress about this, so they're in effect neutered for the time being. For how long, I don't know. And it's if you look at what we're doing and why we're doing it, Greenland's a good example. I mean, that's nothing short of an imperial land grab from like the 1700s. It has resources, so we're gonna revive mercantilism and go seize Greenland from our ally, which is odd.
I was going to ask what you think of all this, friction with Canada and Europe and all of this Greenland stuff. It sounds like you think I mean, this is just, I don't think he's using the diplomatic toolbox. I think he's sort of lashing out at people. And I don't think that leads to good outcomes. I said to someone recently, a Trump supporter said to me, might makes right. And I'm like, well, might makes right doesn't actually make responsible statecraft. And you can quote the line. I keep bringing this up, but someone said to me that line from the Peloponnesian War. The strong do what they can, the weak suffer what they must. And I said, yeah, but you didn't read the rest of the story because the Athenians don't. It doesn't end well for them in the end.
Mhm.
Hubris is punished.
Yep.
Nemesis comes in and punishes hubris, and the skills get rebalanced.
Mhm.
Recklessness is a very bad thing to engage in for any nation state, and leaders shouldn't engage in it because it leads to downfall.
No, I'm right there with you. And this is it's a very disturbing drift in American society, period. I think you can draw a straight line from might makes right, the comment you heard from him, to the shootings in Minneapolis, right? Um, it's like, well, the man had a gun. What was he doing going up to federal agents who had guns? What did he expect? It's like, well, maybe he expected to be able to walk around his city with a legal firearm on his person, appropriately concealed, and show his displeasure with the government in a nonviolent way. But apparently he didn't have enough might to be right. And the fact that people are signing on to that, I think, shows a pretty massive departure from who we are as a people. And it's brought on by the last 20 years of overseas conflict, where we rolled around in the Middle East, killing goat herders and locals on a whim. That's mostly what we did. We weren't really seizing terrain. We were killing people inside of networks to try and take down the networks because we could. And to go back to the Peloponnesian War, it didn't work very well. They're we're not there anymore, really. Nor do we have any kind of influence. In Iraq, Iran has the most influence. Afghanistan, who knows? We're just not there. Like they're back to being Afghans again. Like spend a couple $1 trillion, replace the Taliban with the Taliban, and it's tons of might, no right. But no,
Well,
it's
also, I
the
think this kind of thing can lead to blowback. Like
absolutely.
what if you have like some I'm not saying I want this to happen or that it will
Mhm.
happen, but you don't know, maybe some guy that is really anti-government and sort of it's like a Tim McVeigh character sees what happened and thinks, I'm at war with the federal government. You don't know what he could do,
Mhm.
and I mean, domestic terror happens. I mean, we saw
It
it in the
does.
90s. And
Yeah.
I do think you can get blowback when you're, I mean, especially, I mean, they're literally just spitting on the face of Second Amendment people.
Mhm. And a lot of them are accepting it, and that's really disturbing. It's just in a way it's amazing the mental gymnastics you have to to do to be a staunch Second Amendment supporter, but then to support uh, the federal government murdering a guy in the street, really two people, um, and that's not the group of people I thought they were. But I'd be more concerned about blowback internationally because this administration could not do it if they were trying to ruin our influence and standing in the world morally, financially. If they were trying to ruin that, they could not do a better job than like what they're doing right now. I mean, I don't think this is deliberate, but it would be a great way to do it deliberately. We've managed to, completely alienate almost the entire world. We're threatening war with China over Taiwan. We've stoked the flames in Ukraine continuously. That war could have been over a long time ago. And that's bad enough. But then recently you have this, administration's war on NATO. I'm not the biggest fan of NATO in terms of an alliance structure, but what is important is our relationship with Europe. We've managed to rebuild Europe into a massive economic power who is very loyal to us for our efforts. And particularly when you're taking a look at how we're alienating the other great powers on Earth, I don't understand why we're doing what we're doing to our European allies. We don't have to support their efforts in Ukraine necessarily, but to push them away and towards China and Russia like everybody else, it just wildly does not make sense to me.
You ever seen to get back to the
Mhm.
Pretti killing? Have you ever seen the Western movie Shane with Jack Palance?
I have not.
There's this, he's like a corrupt sheriff in a Jack Palance, and he throws a gun at the one guy, and he says, "Pick up the gun, pick it
Yeah.
up." And the guy picks up the gun, and he shoots him. And then Jack Palance looks around and says, "You saw him, he had a gun." And I was thinking about that scene in that movie because I just see all these people reacting with, "Well, he had a gun." And I'm like, well, he had a concealed carry permit. Legally, he's allowed to have a gun. And he
Right.
wasn't brandishing a weapon.
Mm.
And from the angle that I saw, it seems like they removed the gun from him and then
Mhm.
shot him in the head multiple times
Yep.
or shot him multiple times. And it's very bizarre to me that people are saying, well, don't go to a protest with a gun. He had a concealed carry. He's allowed to have the gun.
Mhm.
I just don't understand this.
I'm right there with you. I mean, the first question I ask is, I mean, I carry. It's Florida, right? Like I've got two little kids, a pregnant wife. Um, I'm trained. Like I don't want anybody else trying to defend my kids for me. I want that control. Um, and what he was doing, he's like, was he going into a bad neighborhood? Like, I mean, these are questions that I would love to answer because, you know, I'm not going to carry to Publix down the street, but if I'm going to an area where I think I might need to defend myself, absolutely. Was he thinking about shooting federal agents like DHS said in their statements? Absolutely not. The guy didn't have it out. Why would he wait for his one-way suicide mission? Like, why not just get it over with? You know? Um, it's not the that's not the actions of somebody who wants to do that. And for people on the right to constantly harp on the fact that he was carrying a weapon, therefore got his just desserts, it's ludicrous. They love to throw out the term copium all the time. That's some hardcore copium. And the downstream effect of this, which will be interesting to watch, is what kind of restrictions get placed on the Second Amendment coming out of this. Trump has not been super friendly the Second Amendment. Period. The people who support him support it. Absolutely. He, I think, crowdsourced the correct rhetoric to throw out there. But the bump stock ban after Las Vegas, which nobody talks about. Different aspects of it. He doesn't have a great rating from really any conservative gun group.
Yeah, and I think the NRA and Gun Owners of America, which Gun Owners of America is even more strident on Second Amendment stuff than
Mm-hmm.
NRA in a lot of ways. I mean, they seem very perturbed by this and perturbed by this sort of anti-Second Amendment.
Yeah, Kyle Rittenhouse too. Yeah, Kyle Rittenhouse is out there tweeting against the president. Like,
Yeah, I did not have that on my bingo card.
nope, not at all.
Well, and the other thing I keep seeing is people saying, "Oh, well, now the left has discovered that they're pro Second Amendment." John Stewart is talking about how he had a right to carry the gun. Since when are lefties and liberals pro? And I'm like, this is not the issue, though. Like I don't really care what lefties think. I mean, people assume that I'm very left. I consider myself an independent, but I've always been fine with the Second Amendment. And to me, it's like I just see a lot of people trying to divert attention away from the issue. I don't know
Oh,
what you
agreed.
think of that.
No, 100%. They're trying. I mean, this gets into the mechanics of how the administration runs their communications and media, which goes back to a Steve Bannon principle of flooding the zone. Where you try and throw as much chaff out there, um, to distract people from the core issues or what is actually going on. In the beginning of the show, asked me how the first year went. Like, man, has this been a decade? And a lot of it is because of that strategy, where there's this constant deliberate insertion of things that do not matter, of red herrings, you know, arguments based on emotion that take away from the focus on a core issue set. Like with this, they're deflecting the Second Amendment. They're making it a left-right thing. Like, are you kidding me? Like, can you not try to divide people for 30 seconds? And what upsets me more is people taking the bait and going after each other. It's like, whoa, Will, you wear tie-dye and smoke weed. You can't handle a weapon. It's like, no, everybody should be armed. We all should be armed. You got to defend your house. You don't like the cops? Learn to shoot. That's you don't have to call them except to clean up. That's sorry, it's a little dark, but you look at Venezuela. How do we boil this down, right? The issue was us killing unarmed combatants, quote unquote combatants, in international waters. I wrote a piece about this for Responsible Statecraft, I think like last month. But the way that they split people is like, oh, you have a problem killing people, bringing fentanyl into this country. It's like, oh, in this case, yeah, I do. Like illegally, yeah. Like it's very easy to pull the trigger. It's very hard to stop a problem long term. You can't kill your way to a solution in really anything. Um, and to split people over a nonsensical aspect of a very important legal issue which defines our standing in the world is just one example of this. And you can pull any of them out of a hat, really. Just go through. You can go day by day. What issue was important, and then the next day it's something completely different, and then it's a third thing on the third day, and a fourth thing, and then maybe the first thing pops up, and they just keep throwing stuff out there, throwing red meat out there to get the base to attack the left, to get headlines off the front page. And I just wish that more Americans would take a time out and say, hold on, like the reason I'm on this ride is because I choose not to get off. I choose not to get off and go talk to my neighbor about something important, find out how they feel, and maybe build a consensus, like community organizing, if you will.
Have you ever come across elements of the right that are explicit about this sort of strategy that you're talking about, or?
So, I know and understand it. Based on my work on the inside, I worked on campaigns, multiple campaigns. I'm very familiar with how Steve Bannon ran the operation the first time in 2016. I thought it was fascinating, so I really studied up on it. Now, do people understand this is happening? No, they don't. They feel that their core emotional belief, and this is the funny thing about what's happening right now, is it's almost like an inversion. Remember a couple years ago, uh, the mantra was "F your feelings," facts don't lie. Now it's all about how you feel about the issue. Well, these drug dealers I feel they're bad. I feel that what ICE is doing in various areas is good. They are the good. And if you don't like the good guys, then you like the bad guys. It's very binary. And people fall for it all the time, which is kind of wild looking at the right now, because they become so wrapped up in their emotional response to an issue that they look past the facts deliberately over and over and over again.
We've talked about the Second Amendment aspect. How important do you think the First, and as Marjorie Taylor Greene said, the Fourth Amendment aspect are to this?
Fourth Amendment is probably the most important part of it. And quite frankly, the Fourth Amendment in our country is the most abused amendment. We've had blanket surveillance on all of our communications for 25 years, 24 years, 25 years. Predates the Patriot Act. Patriot Act was the kind of the nail in the coffin on that. But if you don't have a Fourth Amendment, if you don't have if you don't require a warrant to come search your property, to get into your devices, that's a big one. Then you don't really have a First Amendment. If what I'm saying in private is being monitored and possibly manipulated against me, I'm not saying me in particular, I'm saying like I generally us, then what First Amendment do you really have? I know any number of people now who are nervous about talking on the phone, criticizing the government, and that's a pretty scary wake up call. The First Amendment, it only exists because of the Second Amendment. That's cliche right now, but it's true. If Alex, I don't know him, I'm referring to my first name basis here, can be killed exercising his First Amendment right because he had a Second Amendment feature on that right, then what do you really have? Then what do you like? You really don't have either. But then his First and Second Amendment, like demonstrations and all these protesters or First Amendment demonstrations are based upon the Fourth Amendment violations that are occurring all around them. And there's enough legal precedent out there that that I guess enables this to continue, but it really needs to be stopped. And I don't have a solution for that other than to continue to express your displeasure with what's going on through the First Amendment and get louder,
What do you
and
make of
see
all
what's
the
response.
people trying to argue, oh well, they're agitators and they're interfering, so they deserve it. I mean, I do think people have a right to protest.
I agree completely. It's I think they're playing into the hands um of those in power. They want everybody to shut up and just toe the line. And by saying like, well, they're speaking out against what's going on, therefore they have a comment, like, no, they don't. Not at all. Like this is we're supposed to be a society in which ideas, you have to get the idea, the marketplace of ideas where, you can get out there and say whatever you want within, a little bit of reason. And if it's a stupid idea or it's counterproductive to society, then it gets negotiated out. People come together and like convince you otherwise, or you have a center of gravity on a vote that says, no, we're not going to go do that. Um, but that only occurs because the people speak through the representatives, or they speak, loudly enough to get a representative who will echo what they want. And we are rapidly losing that. I don't know many congressmen out there who actually represent the interests of their people. The two that I would tag immediately are Massey and Marjorie Taylor Greene. And Greene is gone, and they're trying to primary Massey. So it doesn't bode well long term for any of
Can
this,
you
really.
speak more to what do you make of this war on Thomas Massey? Because Trump really just seems to have it out for him.
He does. Um, I
Is it
think
all
it's
about Israel?
probably it's so like I'll give you kind of a vignette here. Um, Trump has very thin skin, and he probably equates what Massey is saying on any number of issues, war, stuff of substance, um, as a personal attack on him. Then he's got his donors and he's got the people who tell him what to say. This guy is very managed. Um, you know, like he's got a reputation for flying, kind of like too close to the sun. You can't take his phone away. And we have these weird tweets at 3 a.m. Like, yeah, you have this myth that he is a some kind of wild card in the White House, when in reality, like he turns to people all the time and says, what should I think about this? And all you need to do to get him to sign on to it is to, tell him he's right, he's awesome, this guy's a jerk, whatever. And then the point about Israel, I think, is a big one, because that really gets into Trump's donor base. So you have this combination of people within the administration or supporting the administration who don't like the fact that Massey keeps highlighting things that are uh, problematic for their continued success within the administration, plus a bit of a personal thing. So they convinced Trump to make it all personal. And there you go.
And Trump likes that Mary Madelson money.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, 100%. Man, they tell him he's awesome. So, and he's like, yeah, I am awesome.
Just a few more things here. I know I've kept
Mhm.
you a little bit long,
Oh,
but
you're good.
one of the things that I was like annoyed by was Megyn Kelly's comments. And I'm sorry, but I just find this woman to be an opportunistic grifter. She said, I know I'm supposed to feel sorry for Alex Pretti, but I don't. You know why I wasn't shot by Border Patrol this weekend? Because I kept my ass inside and out of their operations. And I'm thinking to myself, did you hear about what happened in Miami Beach recently with that woman who, there was a woman who basically said of the mayor that he doesn't care about the genocide of Palestinians. And
Okay.
a detective sent cops to her, okay, to her apartment or her home. Okay, now Megyn Kelly has been friendly with Tucker Carlson. I think she's even criticized Israel. Should cops go to her? I mean, that's what I don't get is like we're seeing a much bigger thing here where Police are just out of control. Now like I said, literally at Miami Beach, a woman has had police visit her simply for making comments about the mayor not caring about what she perceives as the genocide of Palestinians in Gaza. Where do we draw the line? You see what I'm saying? And I don't think people like Kelly take that seriously because who's next? Who's next on the chopping block for asking a question?
And there you have the problem, right? Who funds Megyn Kelly? I don't know, but I imagine, I ran into this working at Military Times. It's you have to be very careful when you do anything corporately that bites the hand that feeds. And when I was at Military Times, it was largely it was the military industrial complex which bought ad space, which did all these things. So my editor was not keen on any kind of article that was critical. Same deal going on here. Megyn Kelly, she's allowed a little bit of dissent, but she's not genuine when she backtracks on something like this. And what bothers me with that, this is watching this for months. The attempt to deport people over their political opinions about a war that we're not involved in. And there was a massive attempt in Congress to make that law. And it's that's bone chilling. And once again, one of these things that should have been debated on the front page that was controversial and thus largely drowned out when it came to public discourse by just news stories peppering the zone or Trump doing something outrageous over here, just pushed to the back page.
Yeah, and I guess what I'm getting at is like I think we're lurching towards. I'm not saying we're in a police state, but we're lurching towards police state USA in multiple ways. The attacks on Gaza protesters is one. What we saw happen to Pretti and Gooden is another, and I think these things are actually interconnected.
No, I agree. I completely agree with you. And my greatest fear is that we end up adopting more of a British model on, how the state responds to dissent. Like in Great Britain, if you tweet something hateful, you can go to jail. And how that's defined is incredibly subjective, giving all the power to the state. And we are creeping up on that rapidly. And it's being laid out in areas which confusingly, I think to the average person, do not really have the core interest of the American people at its center. Me criticizing the Israeli government should be just the same as me criticizing the government of Belize. Like, nobody should really give a shit. Let's be real. Or it should be completely warranted. Like, hey, I'm an American. My tax dollars are going there. I don't like how they're being spent. It should be completely warranted. But that's the thin angle that they're taking on this. And it's like a camel nose. Like you're right. It's like a camel nose under the tent. Once he gets in, man, it's hard to get him back out. And the level of technology that DHS is utilizing, or that I've been seeing my local sheriff's department, on continuous monitoring, like being able to pick up cell phone traffic, email traffic, watch you browse in real time, and the way they're able to do this without a warrant, would suggest that maybe we're not on our way to a police state. Maybe it's like 40%, 50% already in place.
What do you think of in terms of guardrails? Because I know liberals will say all the guardrails are gone this time around,
Mhm.
but there was just a Trump-appointed judge that blocked the Trump administration from destroying evidence in the Pretti shooting.
Mhm.
And this is coming from MSNBC, MS Now. I do think there is still some guardrails. I mean, this judge said, literally used the phrase "destroying or altering evidence," like it won't be allowed. So, what do you think of the guardrails we have left?
It's tragically the guardrails are all still there. It's just whether or not the people use them. I'll go back to the fundamental guardrail, which is the checks and balances within our system. Like the judicial branch, the executive, the legislative branch, they're all supposed to exist in friction, and they're all supposed to cancel each other out. You're not supposed to have this team sport thing going on with Republicans and Democrats, where everything from one side is good everything on the other side is bad, and vice versa. Um, Now, what's not happening, at least legislatively, is they're not doing their job, to enforce the guardrails that are out there. When it comes to the legal system, I'm glad that that judge did what he did, because it's that's kind of that's his the base function of that individual, and they're demonstrating a lack of political loyalty. They're just doing their job, but I'd like to see more of it. I would like to see somebody from Congress or some buddies from Congress, demand accountability and investigation into all this and call for some people to be fired. I think they're quietly removing Christy Nome right now, but no, this needs to be loud.
Well, they got rid of Bavino, right?
They did. They moved him away and they brought Homan in. And then Christy Nome has kind of been put on ice, for the time being. But no, it's but there's not enough, right? And the only way in our system that you have those balances and you have those guardrails enforced is by public demand. Because everything in our system is supposed to come from the people through our representatives and up. And if it gets blocked, then all you have is an all-powerful executive at the top being able to do whatever they want.
I want to make sure you didn't misspeak. I thought at the beginning there
Sure.
you said tragically those guardrails, but I think you meant tragically those guardrails are there, but they're not always enforced.
Correct. That's yeah. If I misspoke, yeah. No, that's what I meant to say. Yeah.
Okay. Um, Before we close out, the at the beginning of this episode, you said your big concern is the way in which this sort of strategy of divide and conquer, this sort of Bannon strategy you mentioned later,
Mhm.
this idea of like, oh, own the libs at any cost. These people are your enemy. They need to be destroyed. I think you alluded to the fact that this could lead down some very dark roads. And I
Yes.
think that's what Marjorie Taylor Greene was saying as well. Can you talk more about those concerns? I mean, I'm not one of these people that's like, oh, we're going to end up in a civil war, but I do think that this is going to become a real problem because
Mhm.
I mean it's like we're pushing this scenario really where it's like, oh, you have different politics than me, you're the enemy.
Right. That's wrong. That's flat out wrong. You're correct that we're being pushed that way. And, I'll just say real quickly, it's incumbent on, your listeners and the people in this country to talk to somebody on the other side. Just talk to them. Talk about baseball. And then go from there. Something like that. That's how you diffuse this because we're being deliberately shoved together as if we are diametrically opposed people. And it's not true because, like I mentioned earlier, generally speaking, we agree on no matter what your political affiliation is, we agree on probably 75%, 80% of what needs to be done. And that's what the people in power don't want. They don't want a consensus, a unified citizenry underneath them saying, hey, what you're doing is messed up. Stop gaslighting us. Here's what we're sending these people to Congress to do or to the presidency to do. And if you don't like it, we'll get rid of you. Um, so that's one piece of it. Now, one of my biggest concerns with the consolidation of power, particularly with war in the executive, is the ability for the next administration or the administration after that to do whatever it is they want, just like we did in Venezuela, just like we did in Iran, just like we're probably going to do in Iran again, without any authorization from Congress. And the best way I lay this out to people who are conservative is like, hey, you know, I can't wait for Gavin Newsom's invasion of Trashcanistan to liberate the oppressed trans people of Citizenry X. Which, if you allow the executive branch to have that kind of power, very well could happen. And I say that as a way to inflame my peers. I just pick some stuff out that like really triggers them and, toss it all together. I have nothing against Trashcanistan or people's personal decisions. Um, but that's where we're at, right? And if the executive can do that, they can do whatever they want underneath that. to support the war, to silence dissent. If you take the example of DHS right now, how they're operating, none of that has been codified in law. None of it. It's all executive order. You can expect the executive orders which enable all of this to be reversed on day one, and who knows? Maybe we will elect like a real freaking tyrant the next time around who will then completely weaponize that against the American people domestically for whatever reason. We're throwing around that term of domestic terrorism, domestic terrorists, like trying to call Pretti that, trying to call really all these protesters that they're out there conducting
You
terrorism.
took
I
the
expect.
words right out of my mouth because I was just going to mention Christy Nome, the DHS secretary, saying that Pretti was a domestic terrorist who sought to inflict maximum damage on individuals and to kill law enforcement. And I'm thinking to myself, wow, the war really has come home. The global
Mhm,
war on terror has come home. It's come
mhm,
for us now.
mhm.
Anyways, go
Yeah.
on. I'm sorry I interrupted you.
No, you're good. I mean, yeah, we're on the same page. I mean, it's only a matter of time, right? And it's we can chase other rabbit holes here, but like like how far away are we from a domestic agency from using Palantir's targeting software against citizens here? Using the Middle East, they used a version of that in Gaza, and quite frankly, it does not work. It's one of the reasons you saw so many aid workers killed. And put it through an algorithm, and it ties all these things together, and says, "Yeah, that guy's a bad guy." Turns out, it's only as good as the data you put in. Um, it didn't really work in Iraq. And at what point is the government going to say, "Hey, we are being obstructed to the point by which that we can no longer conduct the will of the executive branch. Therefore, we're going to start taking down these networks of protesters." Um, we're not that far away, not that far at all. And if that happens, I think it really could push us towards, really start pushing us towards a civil war. And I hate to say that. It's the first time I ever said that on the air. But my knowledge of insurgencies, having fought them, particularly the pitfalls you get into that cause it to grow. We are doing that, man. We're doing it right now. The war is coming home, and we're screwing up uh, the
Can you
government's
elaborate
relation.
based on that experience of learning about insurgencies? Why do you say this?
So when you have well, I'll start with kind of a generic term here. Everybody's heard of hearts and minds, right? You want to win the hearts and minds. That means you're nice. That means you allow the populace to do what they feel is necessary to live a good life under effectively a security umbrella. That's the objective. Um, it never really happens overseas because you can never provide enough security for the people you're trying to protect. Therefore, you start going on the offense to take down the networks which stand opposed to you. And in doing that, we have never really figured out a methodology that is functional and doesn't serve to inflame support for the people we're trying to squash. You can go all the way back to Vietnam to take a look at that. Iraq, it was really bad. First thing we did was joint coalition provisional order one, which sent all of Saddam Hussein's army home with their weapons. And then because they were enemies of what we perceived as the state, they were disenfranchised and had no ability to fight. Pardon me, had no ability to participate, therefore they fought. And then you get into the grinding operations, right? Where if you're moving into areas and you're trying to take down a network, you make mistakes, you arrest the wrong people, you take down the wrong people. Every time you do one of those things, it creates more people who are opposed to you. There's a saying where for every civilian you kill in a counterinsurgency environment, you create 10 new terrorists, 10 new insurgents. There's a lot of truth to it. And I mean, just look at what they like. Look at the response from Minneapolis over the last couple of weeks. You have any number of people by the tens and hundreds of thousands, if not millions, who supported these deportation activities, saw the government go too far and start squashing their fellow citizens who are now on the other side of it saying this shit needs to fucking end. Pardon my French again. Um, so we're on that pathway. But the natural resolution of this is complete de-escalation. Let these people go back to their normal environments, and then maybe try to reintroduce yourself in a different way. Um, Targeted raids on MS-13, work with local authorities, doing all the things which preserve the rights of the individual people on the ground in these areas. Let them participate as if you live in a representative republic or democracy. Um, but I predict that we will take the route of, which we took with the military industrial complex, which is throw tech at it. We can identify the troublemakers. We're going to take them off
Well,
the
we
board.
already see it with I don't know if you've read 404 Media's reporting, but I mean Palantir is already being used by ICE. I mean they're helping to
Mhm.
build ICE's master database. So if it's
Yeah,
going to be
it's
used there, it'll be used elsewhere.
oh, absolutely, 100%, 100%. It's a matter of what they choose to do with that information, right? If you have popular uprising, I mean, like I think this is an interesting historical question for one of your listeners here. Find me a popular uprising that was successfully squashed completely with brute force, like or taking down networks. Find one where you take out the leadership and no one steps up to continue it because I don't think you can. Um, and it's because people have genuine beliefs. They have a genuine picture in their head for how they're supposed to live, for what looks right, what's morally acceptable. And once you get to that point, it's you where they're willing to stand out there and fight for it. You have a very hard time bringing them back in. And I think we're right at that point where if we push too much further, we're going to see a separation between the two sides politically in this country. And it could be pushing us towards a civil war.
Just two brief things, sir. I promise to let you go. I, do you know Danny Bessner?
I don't believe so.
He's at Quincy. He's like one of the socialist voices over there. But
Okay.
it's interesting. He said something recently after the Minneapolis shooting. He said the left has been arguing for years, literal decades, that the designation "quote unquote" terrorist was bound to be expanded to refer to anyone someone in power disagreed with. It is a term without referent or definition. And he adds in, really libs should listen sometimes to people that were pointing this out. I was wondering if, I think that, I bring this up because Danny's a left-wing guy, you're a conservative guy, but I
Mhm.
think you both share this concern about this amorphous term terrorist because it is
Mhm.
being expanded. I mean,
Oh, big time.
like we said, Kristi Noem is using this term domestic terrorist to
Mhm.
describe a VA nurse that
Yeah.
had a concealed carry and didn't brandish a gun, though. So
Right.
maybe you could comment on the way this term is now being used.
Oh man. Oh, I hope you can keep me for another hour. But so I'll go
I mean,
the big
I guess what I'm asking is this the logical outcome?
um if you subscribe to the chaos theory, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
Everything becomes mush and insane.
right.
But I do think it's a bit of a logical outcome. If you're trying to map out the decay of a society and the absolute loss of authority that the federal government is looking at, because now they have to use these kind of terms in order to really enforce what they want. But with the
Or to like
expansion,
give the air that they can legitimize what they're doing. Yeah.
exactly, 100%. I'll say one baby step back here, and this is a real big pet peeve of mine. How we justified the use of force against Venezuela and the boats out there. And this was a low key, massive power grab by the executive branch. They designated who are the Cartel de los Sols as a foreign terrorist organization under OFAC, which is the Office of Foreign Asset Control over at Treasury. I'm very familiar with OFAC. I spent a tremendous amount of time working on sanctions in the Senate, and it has never been used until this point for force. All you could designate anybody you wanted to under OFAC, and all it did was restrict, like, could they vacation in Miami Beach? Can American banks deal with them? It's financial and travel, that's it. But they took Cartel de los Sols, which was later found out in court when they brought Maduro in, actually not to exist. It was a fake organization.
Yeah, the Justice
And
Department dropped the claims about it.
yep, yep. But they used that as the legal precedent to do all the things they were doing, to use force. And it was based on an internal memo in the White House, which has almost no legal standing whatsoever. It's a wish list of shit, basically. Um, so that in itself is a massive expansion, using legal precedent on how they can use the FTO designation. Now, I believe that Antifa is also on the FTO list. Not FTO, but they're a domestic organization. It is a very small leap from Cartel de los Sols, we've used force, to a domestic group that you want to use force on. Particularly since that decision was not checked by Congress whatsoever. In fact, there were a couple of votes which it didn't codify the decision into law, but it validated it legally, validated what we're doing legally, and that's a massive expansion that we have not seen the end of.
This is outside of the executive branch stuff, but are there any elements of the sort of right wing now that you find worrisome? But I guess what I'm going, I can ask you
Mhm,
bluntly, but
mhm,
I do worry about these like openly like white nationalist types, and I'm not moralizing about it. I
mhm,
just think that these people are impractical and kind of crazy,
mhm.
this idea that they're going to like kick out every black person or what
Yeah.
it's bizarre.
Mhm.
And I think it's dangerous to the right wing and to conservatives.
No, I agree. And I mean, from my experience, I've dealt with none of those people over the years. I think it's a from what I can tell, it's a small and relatively insignificant minority within the voting base. And
They can be loud
everything,
sometimes, I guess, though.
yeah, yeah, and then they can be loud. I just don't like, everybody tends to look for, who's going to be like the brown shirts when fascism comes. Um, I think we already have our answer. It looks pretty clear. You have almost a Praetorian at DHS that is unaccountable currently. And if they're not checked, there you go. You don't need a domestic group to do any of that. I don't really see them. I can't speak for them. I'm not really familiar with their ideology or what they stand on, other than race. But I don't see them necessarily creating any havoc. Um, you know,
You're more worried about the Praetorian Guard that's being run by the executive branch, in other words.
yes, I'm more worried about the government. 100% more. They have the guns, they have the money, they have the power. And they have managed to squash all dissent. Just look how quiet Congress is.
That's actually a lead into the very last thing I wanted to ask. What are your biggest concerns with Trump going forward in the next 3 or so years?
So I'll start with the substantive and I'll get into the speculative. Um, my biggest worry with Trump is that he does something internationally that puts us in World War III. That was my biggest worry about Biden. Trump ran on a platform where he was going to end the Ukraine war on day one, et cetera, et cetera. He hasn't. He's made things a lot worse. And what we've seen with Venezuela, with all the things that have been going on, is, I mean, it looked to me like the Venezuela op was a distraction from the Epstein files, just straight up. Um, they launched it the day that the
You mean the
legal
abduction of
deadline.
Maduro was a distraction?
Yeah. Oh
Okay.
yeah. Oh, what'd I say?
No, I was
Oh,
making sure you weren't talking about the gunboats. I wanted to make sure you were talking about the capture of Maduro.
yeah. No, it was capture Maduro. They launched it. They launched it the same day that the legal deadline for the release of all the Epstein files, with the rationale for the redactions and everything else, was due, and we haven't heard a peep. Which shows me that the guy in the White House will do whatever he can do, to continue to drive his own narrative. Like he's operating this like he's running a business, like he's running a venture capital business, basically. Just completely reckless. and it's his decision all the time, and he wants to keep that front and center, and he'll do whatever it takes to get his way, including snatch the leader of another country for no real apparent reason. So with that in mind, I don't think it's too far of a leap to get us involved in, a conflict of really a stupid war, if you will. And there's one waiting for us if we bomb Iran again. This time around, it's not going to be the same. They've already said it. They have an incredibly good missile program, and they have a lot of friends now. OPEC Plus, RICS, and I just don't think he has the intellectual curiosity or background to take any kind of three-dimensional thought with secondary and tertiary effects, or you want to call it blowback, into account when he can make his decision. It's just like, hey, how can I get what I want right now? That's I think it's very substantive. Throw it out there. Like I want to bet with us bombing Iran the first time. I thought it was going to be during the first administration. I won it during the first couple months. It's going to happen again. I'll probably get a kicker from my buddy on that, but kind of neither here nor there. But I think it's coming. Speculatively, what I'm worried about is the unchecked power of something like DHS. Who's to say that they're not going to be around polling stations during the midterms? Trump's already said he doesn't want to have midterms. He
So
doesn't see the
you
need.
don't think that's just like I want this to be very clear for listeners.
Yeah,
You don't think that's just like liberal
no,
what's the word, panicking? Okay.
not at all. I mean, 3 or 4 months ago, I've been talking about this for a while with some of my counterparts, and 3 or 4 months ago, I was like, "Oh, come on, man, that's a stretch." But seeing how they're operating above the law, and you combine that with the president's statements about how he doesn't see the need for midterms, doesn't want midterms, he's done too great of a job. They always screw a president up 2 years in, blah 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 blah. That seems pretty real to me, quite frankly. And and the international piece is backed up by his statements too, where he has stated openly that the only thing constraining him is his own morality, and that's a problem. That's a big problem because no one's ever made the mistake of saying that President Trump is an incredibly moral individual. He's just the mechanical piece you needed to kick in the rotten front door of the structure. And just he's a goon and he's our goon. He's not our goon anymore.
I'm just what do you think's driving him? Is it just like narcissism and being surrounded by sycophants, or what? I just don't understand what the end game is.
Legacy. It's narcissism, but it's tied into legacy. Renaming the Kennedy Center, the wing on the White House, this unquenchable desire, despite not putting any of the grunt work for the Nobel Peace Prize. He wants to be remembered and known as a great man. And he's doing whatever he thinks he needs to do to get there. Unfortunately,
Do you think it's possible that he do you think it's possible that if he tries that with midterms, he would try that with the election,
oh yeah, 100%. I mean, if you
presidential
got away with
election?
it, yeah, if you got away with it, I mean, it's why stop there? I mean, it's I think the parallels to Greenland and the Czech Republic or Czechoslovakia in the 1930s are pretty apt.
So
You've
you
got
don't think
somebody.
it's entirely unfounded, this idea? Because I've been
Yeah,
careful, but I get worried about like a dictatorial sort of Trump.
yeah. It's I mean, okay, let's put it this way. In terms of probability, low. Is it possible? Yes. Is it likely? I hope not. Let's put it that way. But these are qualifications or metrics that have not existed before in our political process at all. They're now introduced as a potential impact. I mean, you've got a president for the first time saying he does not think that midterms are necessary. Like, what? Like, you don't think you're the head of our entire system of government, and you don't think that the process is relevant anymore because it hurts you? That's quite a statement.
Well, let's leave it at that. I know that's a dark note to end on, but
Oh, it's all
still.
good.
uh, James, thank you for coming on.
Yeah, no problem.
Parallax Views. How can my listeners keep up with you? You're on Twitter?
Yeah, I'm on Twitter. It's
Or
JR
Twitter or
Webb.
X or whatever they call it now.
Yeah, the Xbox, the Twitter machine. It's I believe you have my handle. I can't get my browser open right now. Let me.
Oh
I
yeah, I
always
can
forget
look it
it.
up right now. And I'll just throw it out to my listeners. It's James Webb _16.
Yeah, on the Twitter. I love to interact on X from time to time. So if any of your listeners want to drop me a line or want to discuss this, love to hear from them. So
Thanks again, James Webb.
all right, thank you very much.
A special thanks to my $10 and above tier supporters on Patreon who make this show possible with their generous donations. Producers credits shout out to those supporters: Aaron, Jeremy, Matt, Big Bob's Beepers, James, Enoch, David, Sadad, Tristan, Bob, Eva, Miriam, West Bank Robbery Pod, B. Lund, Transnatural Perspectives Podcast, Dan, Nick, Elliot, Fabian, Tom, Arlen, Bo, Spartacus, James, G, Jamie, Will, JC, WV, Sutra, Orc, Catherine, Darko, Nathan, Holland, Dan, Mark, Chase, Olm, Gary, Emilia, Nick, Brace, Michael, and Brian. Please join those listeners in supporting me at the $10 and above tier of my Patreon page, patreon.com/parallaxviews, if you'd like your very own producer's credit on each and every edition of the program. Until next time, you've been listening to Parallax Views with J.G. Michael. To Parallax Views with Parallax Views.
The way out is not simply to say, don't do it, just to prohibit. It's nothing else. If we don't do it, others will be doing it like crazy. So, we have to confront the problem. But no, basically, I know of the great anxieties, problems, new forms of control, but it's also new forms of freedom. This is why I always emphasize that internet and all this new digital stuff, it's a very ambiguous phenomenon, but it's the field of struggle. New forms of enslavement, but at the same time, new incredible forms of freedom. We have to accept the fight with no nostalgia for old, allegedly more authentic communities or whatever. I'm not afraid. I'm not afraid. I'm not afraid. I'm not afraid.